The assembled devotees, all glories to Sri Guru and Sri Gauranga. Hare Krishna. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prashtaya Bhutale Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Iti Namane Namaste Saraswate Devi Gauravani Pacharine Nivasesha Shanyabari Pastichade Shatarine. Hare Krishna. So today is the appearance day of Srila Gadhadhar Pandit, who in the Panchatattva we sing every day the Panchatattva Mahamantra. He is, of course, one of the members of the Panchatattva. Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in 5 features, and he's the internal potency. The Lord has many potencies. The internal potency personified in Gaura Lila appears as Gadhadhar Pandit. And that internal potency, of course, is personified in the form of Srimati Radharani. She's the source of that, of all the various expansions, all the various Devis, etc. So in Gaura Lila, he appears mystically. Everything's mystical. Very esoteric subject matter. Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu himself, although he's Krishna, he's in the mood of Radharani. He's combined Radha and Krishna. But Srimati Radharani, we'll hear more later on, she's also expanded within the Panchatattva as Sri Gadhadhar Pandit. So today we'll hear a little bit about Gadhadhar Pandit, since today is the day we honor his appearance in this world. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. We'll start with this. This is a song compiled. It's one verse from a song compiled by Bhaktivinoda Thakur, Shri Godruma Chandra Bhajana Upadesh. This is the particular verse which applies to Gadadhar. Smarako Gadadhar Kele Kalam Bhava Gaura Gadadhar Pakshachara Smara Gaura Gadadhar Kele Kalam Bhava Gaura Gadadhar Pakshachara Smara Gaura Gadadhar Kele Kalam Bhava Gaura Gadadhar Pakshachara Gaura Gadadhar Kele Kalam Bhava Gaura Gadadhar Shinnu Gaura Gadadhar Charo Katam Pachakotum Makanana Kunjavidam Kunjavidam Shinnu Gaura Gadadhar Charo Katam Bhajagorum Makanana Kunjavidam Gaura Gadadhar Charukatang Bhajagodurma Kanana Kundavidam Bhajagodurma Kanana Kundavidam Jagodurma Kanana Kundavidam. Just remember the artistically playful pastimes of Gaura and Gadadhar, Gaura and Gadadhar's camp. Just listen to the captivating stories of Gaura and Gadadhar and just worship the beautiful moon of Godruma's forest bowers. There's a very intimate relationship between Gaura, Lord Chaitanya, and Gadadhar. We used to say Gadadhar Pandit. He was very learned, but he's addressed like that, Sri Gadadhar. We're going to sing another song now, partly because we're using the computer, and some of the rest of it I'm going to have reading. I hope to read from the computer. And I can't do both at the same time, so we're going to finish the slideshow first, and then we'll use the reading part second. So this is a song. This is a song, or you could say a glorification, compiled by Srila Srup Damodar Goswami. Srila Srup Damodar Goswami was Lalita Devi in Gaura Lila, and most intimate associate of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. It's we don't see him mentioned, neither Ramananda Roy nor Srup Damodar Goswami. They are not present, manifested in Navadvip. In Navadvip, the pastimes of relishing represent basically the pastimes of of Braj Lila, Vrindavan, very intimate, very spontaneous, very personal pastimes in Navadvip, of which Sri Gadadhar was very much a intimate part right from the very beginning of those pastimes. Sri Gadadhar was born a little after Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, very close. His family lived very close to the house of Jagannath Mishra and Sachi Mata. So right from the very beginning, Gadadhar was a very almost constant associate of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. At that time, of course, Nimai, they were both called Pandit, Nimai Pandit, Gadadhar Pandit, because they were scholars. They studied together, they played together, same school. Very different natured. Very different natured. It's described, as we're hearing about Srup Damodar here, but a little song by him at least, that Gadadhar Pandit was very much in the peaceful aspect. Radharani has various expansions, both of her own personal behavior and personally expanding in other manifest forms to exhibit various aspects of loving exchange with Krishna in the form of various eternal gopis, and all with their own different moods, their own different behaviors, bringing pleasure to Krishna. They're expansions of Radharani, but they manifest different aspects of the internal potency to bring pleasure to Krishna. So one of those expansions, and primary expansion, which is in one sense opposed to that of Srimati Radharani, is the right-wing gopi, her name Chandravali. She's very passive, very submissive, serene. His right wing, Dakshina, he has this submissive, whereas Radharani is quite feisty. She can get quite, displaying jealous anger, quite bhama, this mood of jealous anger quite strong. Well, Gadadhara doesn't possess that aspect of Radharani. And it's interesting because when Krishna left Vrindavan and eventuated in Dwarka, of course, through Mathura, and there he married many, many eternal consorts, expansions of the gopis of Vrindavan. So one of those expansions, Chandravali expands, and Srimati Radharani expands in Dwarka Leela with the necessary characteristics therein. Radharani expands herself in that particular form as Satyabhama, and Chandravali expands as Rukmini, kind of the other way around in a sense. And we see that Krishna always, well, not always, but would sometimes try to irritate Rukmini, to get her angry, but he couldn't do it. She would display anger in a different way, not the way that the Radharani expresses it, more of a sort of a kind of a, self-imposed kind of anger. But Radharani would be very expressive in her anger, not in so much just internal. But Rukmini would be very submissive to Krishna, would not oppose him. So similarly, Gadadhara was like that. He was always submissive to Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, no matter what. And when they were childs at school, sometimes Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu would try to irritate him by starting to talk all kinds of, what would we say, logical kind of arguments and various kinds. And they were studying logic and reason and various kinds of grammar and so on at school. And Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu would go off on a tangent, even arguing against different things and challenging Gadadhara. Gadadhara Pandit couldn't handle it. I mean, he didn't like that sort of thing. He would try to get away, try to escape from it. He would try to keep away from it. Although he was so attached to Lord Chaitanya, inseparable. He couldn't handle that aspect, so to speak. Others might fight back and argue, but he wasn't like that. He was very submissive, very serene in his relationship, very passive in his relationship, because that particular expansion or aspect of Srimati Radharani, which is devoid of that kind of bhama, that strong, almost jealous anger, which Radharani sometimes manifests. So like that, they were childhood friends throughout. Lord Chaitanya's pastimes in Navadvip, in Mayapur. And Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was enjoying his childhood pastimes with all of his young friends. They are also described as expansions of the cowherd boys of Vrindavan. So in Gaura Leela, they appear as young boys in Mayapur, Navadvip, and their pastimes there are all based upon scholastic studies and various kinds of pranks and various kinds of games which they would play, of course. But basically, so Gadadhara was prominent, very prominent amongst them. And the gopis, various, they would also, the gopi Krishna, who would enjoy his leelas with the gopis, more Nityananda was with the cowherd boys, but the gopis were expanded as various boyfriends of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in Gaur Leela. So when Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Ishvara Puri, who came through, one time he came through Navadvip, and I can't remember, we stayed wherever it was, but at that time Gadadhara got a lot of his association of Ishvara Puri. Ishwara Puri, also like a guru, practically speaking, was teaching him various subjects. And then later on, Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, when the time came, Gaura Hari, he went to Gaya with the intention, after his father had left the world, Jagannath Mishra had left the world, Lord Chaitanya Gaura Hari just made a declaration he was going there to perform Pinda, the Shraddha ceremony on behalf of his father. But the real intention of Gaura Hari going there was to take initiation, take shelter of Ishwara Puri, who happened to be there at that time when he went. So that was the... he left, Lord Gaura Hari left for some time, and when he was on the way also, but when he was there in Gaya, and he took shelter of Ishwara Puri, and the pastime is there in the Chaitanya Charitamrita of the interaction between Gaura Hari and Ishwara Puri, and how Ishwara Puri awoke within Chaitanya Mahaprabhu the inner mood. One time when Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was with Gadhadhar Pandit, and Gadhadhar Pandit was trying to escape from his taunting. Lord Chaitanya was taunting him with various, arguments and so on. And then Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Gaura Hari, said, "Don't worry, one day, Gadhadhar, you will see what kind of devotee I am. I will manifest my actual inner form, inner mood. And you will see even Lord Brahma and Lord Shiva will be knocking at my door. You will see that one day, Gadadhar." Because when Lord was young, Nimai Pandit, he wasn't very often manifesting this aspect. So for Gadadhar, this was, you could say in many cases, painful. Because he's there to assist Lord Chaitanya in his mission, and this aspect of the mission is not so much of Gadadhar Pandit's, let's say, business. But now Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, when he returned from Gaya, he was in like a different man, a different person, and he was manifesting mad ecstatic symptoms of love of God. Mad for Krishna, crying for Krishna day and night. And he was no longer interested in scholastic studies and all these various things like that. He was not interested in logic and reason, and everything was Krishna, Krishna, Krishna. So Gadadhar Pandit was constantly with the Lord. The Lord would sometimes get almost out of control in his desperate desire to find Krishna. Where is Krishna? One time, Gadadhar Pandit, Mother Sachi would not know what to do. She was so perplexed. Her son was gone mad because her husband wasn't there. He'd passed away. It was very hard for her. Lord Chaitanya was going crazy. Sometimes he would smash things, break things, throw things. We shouldn't imitate this. Saying that, this is, I'm searching for Krishna. I got so determined, so that the emotion was so strong. I just smashed everything. Smashed the car, smashed the tractor, smashed the windows, smashed everything. Smashed my mobile. Oh, that maybe not such a. But smashed everything. He would smash things. He was really smasher. So, one time when Gadadhar Pandit came to him one time, because he was very serene, he had sort of a way of calming Lord Chaitanya down sometimes. And one time Gadadhar came there, he had a betel leaf in his hand, and Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said, "Gadadhar, where is Krishna? I can't live any longer without Krishna. Where is he?" because he was in the mood of, feeling separation. So Gadadhar Pandit said, "My Lord," he didn't say my Lord, he said, don't worry, he's in your heart, he's in your heart. And Gaura said, in my heart? And he started to rip his chest apart. If he's there, I'll find him. He started to rip his chest. He said, calm down, my Lord. No, calm down. Don't worry, be peaceful. Your Lord, your Prananath will come very soon. He will very soon appear. Don't worry, he'll come soon. And then the Lord calmed down a little bit. Mother Sachi was, because this was going on regularly, this type of behavior. She thought, oh my God, what will I do? She would stay at a far distance when her son was in this mood. But then she saw that Gadadhar had calmed him down. So she came forward and said, Gadadhar, please, you stay always with my son. Only you can pacify him. This was his relationship in a sense, because he was so peaceful and so intimate with Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So she wanted him to stay always with her son, to protect him in that way. They had these pastimes, but when they went to, when Lord Chaitanya, of course, took sannyas and went to Puri on the request of his mother, Gadadhar Pandit also went with him. He was with him, he didn't leave him. And he went there, but the mood was a little different because Puri represents Dwarka, primarily. Vrindavan is also there, but generally speaking, it's understood like Lord left Vrindavan and went to Dwarka. Lord left Mayapur, leaving the residents of Mayapur in the feeling of separation, just like he left the residents of Vrindavan but in that mood of separation. Lord Ram left the residents of Ayodhya in the mood of separation. And similarly in Gaur Lila, he left, went to Puri, and Gadadhar Pandit went there, but it wasn't, in a sense, the relationship was still there, but there was more of an intimate relationship with Srup Damodar and Ramananda Roy. We do not see Gadadhar Pandit personally in the pastimes in Gundicha, in the house of Kashi Mishra. What's it called? What's that house called? Gambhir. In Gambhir. In this very intimate, because Gadadhar Pandit's in a mood of separation in a different ways, kind of at a distance, and he's, anyway, it's very esoteric. I'm not qualified to discuss it, but in a distant way. But Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu would go to see him regularly, as we're here in a few minutes after this song. It wasn't that he was isolated. He would go daily to see Gadadhar. Gadadhar Pandit, when they were in Puri, Lord Chaitanya had given him this service of looking after the deity of Tota Gopinath, this beautiful deity, which you may have had the chance to take darshan of there in Puri. Beautiful place, very serene. That was the place where Gadadhar Pandit would stay and worship. That was his allotted service, very intimate. So he was there, but he was there in the, we could say, in Vrindavan. The Tota Gopinath temple is the mood of Vrindavan, and he was worshipping Gopinath there. And Chaitanya would come daily to that place. So we'll hear more later. We're going to sing this song now, or we'll try to. We have no qualification, but we'll try to remember at least Gadadhar Pandit. Gadadhar Pandit's main purpose or main point was to assist Lord Chaitanya. So at least that aspect of Gadadhar's relationship we can try to take on, to assist the Lord in his mission. We may not be able to assist the Lord directly in his internal mission, which was Gadadhar's role, but we can assist in the external mission to spread Krishna consciousness to others by performing Sankirtan Yogya. The Lord had these two purposes, internal, external, and internally speaking, Gadadhar was primarily involved in his internal. Of course, in Navadvipa, he was also there in the Sankirtan. But the Sankirtan, the congregational chanting of the holy name, achieves both. Internal, awakening of the internal, let's say, or the internal aspect of Lord Chaitanya's mission, and the external aspect of spreading Krishna consciousness to the people in general, and internally awakening our dormant love of Godhead, a remembrance of Krishna. So we'll sing this now, and I'll try. It's quite long, so maybe we can sing together after a while, or we'll try to.
Do you want I turn the page?
Oh, that would be good, yeah, please, thank you. You know what to press, don't you? That one's the best. That one's the best, yeah. There's a few you can press. 2 lines at a time it will be. I'm not sure the beat, we'll see as we go. If you're finding it difficult with it, is someone playing Madanga? Well, thank you. Svabhakti yoga lasinam sadavajeva harinam Hari priya ganagragam chichachi sutta priyeshvaram. I'm not sure the beat. What's the beat? Sarada Krishna sevana patkachakam mahachayam Bhajamyaham gadadaram supanditam gurum prabhum. I worship the greatly learned and exalted spiritual master, Srila Gadadhar Prabhu, who appeared very splendid, engaged in the Lord's devotional service. He always performs pastimes in Vraj, where he is very prominent among the gopis, who are very dear to Lord Hari. Lord Chaitanya, the son of Sachi, is the dear Lord of Gadadhar Prabhu, who is preaching the service of Radha and Krishna. Narojvaladi bhavana vidana karma paragam Vichitra Gaura Bhakti Sindhu Raga Bhagalasinam Suraga Magadashakam Bharajavasadayakam Bhajamyaham Gadadaram Supanditam Garum Prabhum. I worship the greatly learned spiritual master, Srila Gadadhar Prabhu. He is expertly absorbed in meditation on the 9 rasas of devotional service, beginning with Ujjvala Rasa, devotional service in conjugal love. And he dances in the waves of the amazing ocean of devotional service to Lord Chaitanya. He preaches the path of Raganuga Bhakti, spontaneous devotional service. And he is a fit person to attain residence in the transcendental land of Raj. Sachistuta Grisara Bhakta Vrindavanja Gauravam Gaurabhava Chitta Padma Madhya Krishna Balavam Mukunda Gaura Rupinam Svabhava Dharmadayakam Bhajamyaham Gadadaram Supanditam Garum Prabhum. I worship the greatly learned spiritual master, Srila Gadadhar Prabhu, the best of those who are devoted to the lotus feet of Lord Chaitanya, the son of Sachi Devi. I offer respectful obeisances to him and treat him with great importance. And he is very dear to Lord Krishna, who is seated in the middle of the lotus flower, which is his heart, assuming his golden form of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. He preaches that Lord Mukunda has assumed the golden form of Lord Chaitanya, and he returns the living entities to their constitutional position as servants of the Lord. Nikunja sevanadika prakasanaika karanam sada sakirati pradam maharasa swarupakam sada chiratari banjam satgurum param Bhajamyaham Gadhadaram Supanditam Garum Prabhum. I worship the greatly learned and exalted spiritual master, Srila Gadadhar Prabhu, who appears very splendid, engaged in the Lord's devotional service. He always performs pastimes in Braj, where he is very prominent among the gopis, who are very dear to Lord Hari. Lord Chaitanya, the son of Sachi, is the dear Lord of Gadadhar Prabhu, who is preaching the service of Radha and Krishna. Mahaprabho Maharasa Prakasana Kurum Priyam Sada Maharasa Kuru Pachakanam Mahaprabha Vajaganadi Bhava Modakarakam Bhajamyaham Gadadaram Sapanditam Garum Prabhum. I worship the greatly learned spiritual master, Srila Gadadhar Prabhu, who is very dear to Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And it is as if he had sprouted from the manifestation of the Lord's ecstatic love. He is always adorned with the garments of ecstatic love of Godhead. And he delights Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu by arousing in the Lord the ecstatic emotional love experienced by the gopis of Braj. Vijendra Vindavandya Pada Yogma Bhakti Vardakam Nijeshuradi Katmata Rapupa Kastanagaham Ashesha Bhakti Shastra Shiksha Yojvalamrita Prabham Bhajamyaham Gadadaram Sapanditam Garum Prabhum. I worship the greatly learned spiritual master, Srila Gadadhar Prabhu, who expands the mellows of devotional service and whose lotus feet are worshipped by the kings of the Brahmins. Among his confidential associates, he reveals his actual form as Srimati Radharani. He distributes the nectar of the ecstatic mellows of the gopis' conjugal love, strictly following the instructions of all the devotional scriptures. Mudani ja priyadika svapada padma sindubhir Maharasana vamrita padeshta Gaura bhaktidam Sadasta satvikam vitam nijeshta bhaktidayakam Bhajamyaham gadadaram supanditam garam prabhum. I worship the greatly learned spiritual master, Srila Gadadhar Prabhu, with delight He is giving the devotional service of Lord Chaitanya, which reveals the nectarian ocean of the most exalted mellows of devotional service, along with the nectar flowing from the lotus feet of the gopis, headed by Srimati Radharani, who is most dear to Krishna. Gadadhara Prabhu is decorated with the 8 transcendental ecstatic symptoms of Sattvika Bhav, and he is distributing devotional service to his worshipable Lord. Yadiya Ritti Raga Raga Bhaga Digdi Manaso Naro Api Yati Turname Vanaya Bhava Vajanam Tamudvalakta Chitta Metu Chitta Matta Chatpado Bhajamyaham Gadadaram Tu Panditam Gurum Prabhum. I worship the greatly learned spiritual master, Srila Gadadhar Prabhu, even a conditioned soul, whose mind becomes anointed by the colorful waves of spontaneous devotional service, as delineated by Srila Gadadhar Prabhu, quickly attains the highest level of devotional service. He becomes like a maddened bumblebee, whose mind is anointed with the mellow of Ujjvala Rasa. Maharasam Itapavam Sadagadadharastakam Patettu Yaksu Bhaktito Vajaganaganotsavam Sachita Nurjapada Padma Bhakti Ratna Yoyatam Labeta Radhika Gadada Agri Padma Sevaya. These 8 verses glorifying Srila Gadadhar Prabhu distribute the nectar of the most exalted mellow of devotional service, and they are like a festival for the gopis of Raj. If one regularly reads these verses and serves the lotus feet of Srila Gadadhar Prabhu, who is an incarnation of Srimati Radharani, then he will become qualified to attain the jewel of pure devotional service for the lotus feet of Lord Chaitanya, the son of Sachi Devi. Jai Jai Sri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda Jaya Advaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhaktavindam. We can repeat together. This is from the Chaitanya Charitamrita, Adilila 10:15. Bada Shaka Gadadhar Pandita Gosani Teno Lakshmi Rupa Tanra Samakehanai. One more time. Bada Shaka Gadadhar Pandita Gosani Teno Lakshmi Rupa Tanra Samakehanai. This verse is a verse in the Adi Leela, so we're going through the intimate associates of Lord Chaitanya. In this section, he's already dealt with Gadadhar, with Nityananda, Advaita, and their associates also, their branches. The various branches of the Chaitanya tree are being described. So here, Gadadhar Pandit, and after this verse, we won't be dealing with that today, but the various associates, the confidential associates of Gadadhar Prabhu, Pandit, depending which line you're in, will be described. But this verse describes Gadadhar Pandit. Gadadhar Pandit, the 4th branch, is described as an incarnation of the pleasure potency of Sri Krishna. No one, therefore, can equal him. We can't imitate, we can follow certain aspects of his behavior. And certain aspects, of course, we cannot, because he has this intimate aspect of assisting the Lord in his pastimes of feeling separation from Krishna. Although he is Radharani himself, he's what can we say, esoterically, we can only repeat words without any realization in my case. He's that aspect of Radharani which exists after Krishna has stolen away the heart of Radharani. And she's like a stone, devoid, she's like, just like when Krishna leaves Vrindavan, it said the residents of Vrindavan are just like statues, almost lifeless. He's taken away that kind of loving aspect of Radharani, he's stolen it. So Gadadhara is like that. He's kind of devoid. He's like empty kind of feeling. But he's in this mood of submissive mood of just being there for Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. But we'll go on to the purport. We won't go on. Where's the purport? There's a purport. It didn't make it. Okay. I don't think I have the purport. I have it, but it's in the. We can get it later. We'll read it in a minute. It's in the the reading section. No problem. So this is the Panchatattva, and there's Gadadhar Prabhu on the right side as we look at them in the kirtan mood. Lord Chaitanya would go daily to the Toti Gopinath temple to associate with Gadadhar, practically daily. And what would Gadadhar be doing there? Gadadhar Pandit would be. He would be reading. He was famous for reading Srimad Bhagavatam. He would read the Bhagavatam over and over again. Lord Chaitanya would come and hear. All the devotees would go there to hear the beautiful, sweet sounding voice of Gadadhar Pandit reading Srimad Bhagavatam. We hear later on, after Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu left this world, Gadadhar Prabhu remained a little longer there in Puri. And Srinivasacharya was sent there to Puri. I think Narahari Sharakar, the Siksha Guru, sent him there to Puri to hear the Bhagavatam. Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu given this through Srup Damodar, of course, this instruction that one should hear the Bhagavatam from a self-realized soul. But Srinivas went there to specifically hear the Bhagavatam from Gadadhar Pandit. And Gadadhar Pandit was, Lord Chaitanya just left, so Gadadhar Pandit was devastated. He was already in a mood of separation, you could say, but now he was actually in separation. And he couldn't stop crying day and night. So he said, yes, I would like to offer this service to you and teach you Bhagavatam, but unfortunately I cannot, because the entire manuscript has been ruined. His tears were flowing from his eyes and the whole manuscript was ruined. And that's another pastime. But this is the service, the predominant service of Gadadhar Pandit, along with worshipping the deity of Gopinath, was the studying of the Srimad Bhagavatam, reading Srimad Bhagavatam, Bhagavat Katha. So there he is, reading from the Bhagavatam manuscripts to Lord Chaitanya and the devotees all gathered around. Such is the power of reading Srimad Bhagavatam. So we can learn that from this pastime of Gadadhar Pandit, to not think, oh, I've read the Bhagavatam. Oh, well, I go to the class once a week, or whatever it is. And I make sure I take my mobile phone so I can catch up on my text messages during class, or whatever we do. But no, the Bhagavatam is the inseparable for the Vaishnavas. It is the book form of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, appeared to give us his association in this form. And these are the deities. Now, interestingly enough, we don't generally, in ISKCON, from the time of Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj specifically, we don't see that the devotees are worshipping Gaura Gadadhar. This is deities of Gaura Gadadhar. And Gaura Gadadhar, Lord Chaitanya and Gadadhar Prabhu. Because in this mood, this is the mood of Madhurya Ras, the intimate aspect, very intimate. And it is a mood for those who are very advanced. These are Bhaktivinoda Thakur's deities in Godrumadrup. He was worshipping Gaura Gadadhar, as we saw from that one verse of the song we sang earlier on. He was worshipping Gaura Gadadhar, along with Radha Madhava, worshipable deities. And many of the Vaishnavas were worshipping Gaura Gadadhar if they were in that mood. The worship of Gaura Nitai, Nityananda's side, you could say. But to reach that platform, one has to go through Lord Nityananda. We cannot imitate. It's not something to be imitated just because of an internal sentiment. And it can be dangerous. And now we're going to stop the slideshow, but don't turn, those who are expert, don't turn off the slide projector because otherwise you may have a problem. But we're going to stop the slideshow, because that's all I got together last night. And we can do someone know how to do the double tap? If you can double tap on that. Oh, you don't have to. Yeah, that one. Double tap quickly. That's it. And just leave it alone. That's it. Thank you. Well, now we're going to go off the slide projector. And hopefully we're going to go now to a little bit of reading from Chaitanya Charitamrita. Okay, Hare Krishna. So, I can't say where the reference is. I didn't have time to really find out, but here's this is from a lecture from maybe Radhanath Maharaj or someone, I don't know. It's in a lecture from ISKCON Desire Tree. To unite Gaura with Gadadhar is the highest ideal of the Gaudiya Vaishnavas, because in their internal mood it is Radha and Krishna, is Radharani in separation. To reunite them together is the Gaudiya Vaishnavas, as it says here, the highest ideal. But nonetheless, the worship of Gaura Gadadhar is in Madhurya Ras, so it is not for the Kanistha Adhikari, on the beginning stages of devotional service, where one strives to follow the principles and avoid offenses. Rather, this is for advanced devotees who are already past the stage of anartha. They're on the platform basically of Raganuga Bhakti. They're already steady, fixed in their devotional service in Krishna consciousness and are experiencing a genuine taste, ruchi. So this is a statement of, I don't know exactly where it's come from, but this is why our Srila Prabhupada, the Acharya, Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj, emphasizing the worship of Gaura Nitai. Is we cannot approach the worship of Radha Krishna without the mercy of Nityananda. One has to get his mercy. Radharani does not bestow her mercy on anyone unless they get the mercy of Nityananda. And it can be dangerous. Okay, it can be unplugged now. The fan has gone off. It can be very dangerous because there are very offenses to be taken into account. Whereas in the worship of Gaura Nitai, of course, I mean, there are obviously, limits. But in principle, the devotees performing service of Gaura Nitai, offenses are not taken into account. We're approaching through the right channel. Now, I didn't find, the purport's here, but I unfortunately it's on the other page. If you can find the purport to that verse, if Lochan's still here? Yes. That verse which I quoted from Chaitanya Charitamrita, that would be nice, because I've edited this and there's only a few verses left. We're going to read some pastimes now from when Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was in Puri. This is from Chaitanya Charitamrita. And interaction with Gadadhar Pandit. Just a few. Time doesn't allow. Not so much said anyway. This is from the Antya Lila, chapter 7, text 90 onwards. At that time, when the devotee was in Puri, he was kind of in a different line, and now he has his own line. It's called Balabha Sampradaya. And primarily they worship Krishna and the chant in Vatsalya Bhav, more in Vatsalya Bhav, not so much in Madhurya Bhav, Vatsalya. So he was a very great devotee, and Lord Chaitanya had great respect for him. He's a very learned scholar, but there's this ongoing rasa between the devotees in different moods, and sometimes there was misunderstandings, and sometimes a little bit of, say, pride would come there. Balabhabhata was very eager. He made his own commentary on Srimad Bhagavatam, and he was very eager to show everyone this commentary and how good it was. And but everyone would refer him to Lord Chaitanya, or they wouldn't listen to it unless Lord Chaitanya approved. It was the mood. And Lord Chaitanya would not approve anything unless Swarup Damodar approved. Anyway, he took it to Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and said, I'd like to show you my commentary on Srimad Bhagavatam, and he even belittled the commentary of Sridhar Swami. Lord Chaitanya was not at all pleased. He said, he called him like a prostitute, one who does not accept the master, the husband, is like a prostitute. So because Lord Chaitanya accepted the commentary of Sridhar Swami as the most authorized, but Vallabhabhata was saying his commentary was better. There was some areas where Sridhar Swami didn't get it quite there. So Lord Chaitanya wasn't at all impressed, and he wouldn't listen to the commentary. So thus, consequently, nobody in Puri would listen to his commentary. None of Lord Chaitanya's followers would listen to the commentary. So Vallabhabhata was very upset, and he was, sidelined, and he was feeling very frustrated. So Gadadhar Pandit, being very humble kind of personality, very submissive, very respectful. So he went to him. In some ways, Vallabhabhata looked at Gadadhar Pandit like his spiritual guide, but in this case, he imposed upon him. So thereafter, Vallabhabhata went to the home of Gadadhar Pandit. He kept coming and going, showing affection in various ways, and thus maintained a relationship with him. Because Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu did not take Vallabhabhata very seriously, none of the people of Jagannath Puri would hear any of his explanations. Ashamed, insulted, and unhappy, Vallabhabhata went to Gadadhar Pandit. Approaching him with great humility, Vallabhabhata said, I have taken shelter of you, my dear sir. Kindly be merciful to me and save my life. Please hear my explanation of the meaning of Lord Krishna's name. In that way, the mud of the shame that has come upon me will be washed away. Thus Pandit Goswami fell into a dilemma. He was in such doubt that he could not decide alone what to do. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Okay, it's a purport. I won't read the purport because it just says the same thing. Although Gadadhar Pandit Goswami did not want to hear it, Vallabhabhata began to read his explanation with great force. Have you ever come across people like that? They just, can I speak to you for a minute? And before you even answer, they start telling you what they want to say, You can't get away. Have you ever had situations like that? Have you ever experienced things like that? You can't get away, it's like you're stuck there. And they're kind of like making sure you. And even if you try to get away, they follow you and they keep on going at you, You said, can I speak to you for a second? It's not speaking for a second. They just want to download a whole book on you. Although Gadadhar Pandit Goswami did not want to hear it, Vallabhabhata began to read the explanation with great force. Because Vallabhabhata was a learned Brahmin, Gadadhar Pandit could not forbid him. Thus he began to think of Lord Krishna. My dear Lord Krishna, he requested, please protect me in this danger. I have taken shelter of you. Internally he was praying like this. So somewhere in that situation is an opportunity to take shelter of Krishna, to protect us. It's an interesting situation. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is present in everyone's heart, and he will certainly know my mind. Therefore I do not fear him. His associates, however, are extremely critical. You should get criticized, by others. You know that Lord Chaitanya, Lord knows your heart, it's not you're going out of your way to hear it, but it's like you associated, ta-da. And the other devotees, therefore, will be very critical. Although Gadhadhar Pandit Goswami was not the least at fault, some of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu devotees showed affectionate anger towards him. So this is his mood. He was always and Lord Chaitanya would sometimes, as we said earlier, he would sometimes try to incite anger in him, but he couldn't. Even though Lord Chaitanya would get sometimes very heavy or strong with him, he would submit. Although there was one time when Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu decided that he was leaving for Vrindavan. He was going to leave Puri. Of course, Gadadhar Prabhu had been given this service. Lord Chaitanya told him to worship the Lord, to stay there. Kshetra sannyas, you stay in one place and you perform your service there. You don't leave. You give everything else up. You just serve. Stay. Kshetra sannyas, one place. Kshetra. And this is Jagannath Puri. Kshetra. Kshetra is known as Sri Kshetra. So he was staying there. And then when Lord Chaitanya, he heard that Lord Chaitanya was leaving, he couldn't bear the idea that Lord Chaitanya was leaving. So Gadhadhar Pandit started to follow Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu saw him following. He said, this is not good. You have to go back to your service there. Your service to me is to worship Gopinath. In Puri, it's not good if you leave your service. There's a little example like we see in the Bhagavad Gita, and Arjuna also wanted to leave, different reason, wanted to leave his service. And then the whole Bhagavad Gita was Krishna convincing him, don't leave your service. Stick to it. But have the right consciousness. But Gadadhar Pandit argued that, my Lord, wherever you are, that is Vrindavan, to hell with my service, to serve your lotus feet is the goal of everything. He was very attached to having this. He couldn't bear the idea, because he always around Lord Chaitanya, even if not right there. He was always, there. And he couldn't bear this idea, but eventually Lord Chaitanya convinced him to go back. What type of example would this be? He convinced him, and he did. He had to go back and serve Gopinath there in separation in Puri. So he submitted. When Gadadhar Prabhu or Pandit started... Okay, sorry, I didn't realize we got it here. He was forbidden to come and not to give up his vow of Kshetra sannyas. When he was requested to return to Jagannath Puri, Gadadhar Pandit told the Lord, wherever you are staying is Jagannath Puri. Let my so-called Kshetra sannyas go to hell. When Chaitanya Mahaprabhu asked Gadadhar Pandit to remain at Jagannath Puri and engage in Gopinath service, Gadadhar Pandit replied, one renders service to Gopinath 1,000,000 times simply by seeing your lotus feet. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu then said, if you abandon his service, it will be my fault. It is better you remain here and render service. That will be my satisfaction. The Pandit replied, do not worry, all the faults will be on my head. I shall not accompany you, I shall go alone. I shall go to see Sachimata, but I shall not go for your sake. I shall be responsible for the abandoning of my vow and service to Gopinath. Thus Gadadhar Pandit Goswami travelled alone, but when they all arrived at Cuttack, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu caught him, and he went into the Lord's company. No one can understand the loving intimacy between Gadadhar Pandit and Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Gadadhar Pandit gave up his vow and service to Gopinath, just as one gives up a piece of straw. Gadadhar Pandit's behavior was very pleasing to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's heart. Nevertheless, the Lord took his hand and spoke to him, displaying the anger of love. You have abandoned Gopinath's service and broken your vow to live in Puri. All that is now complete because you have come so far. Your wanting to go with me is simply a desire for sense gratification. In this way you are breaking two religious principles, and because of this I am very unhappy. If you want my happiness, please return to Lilachal. You will simply condemn me if you say any more about this matter. Saying this, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu got into a boat, and Gadadhar Pandit immediately fell down unconscious. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu ordered Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya to take Gadadhar Pandit with him. The Bhattacharya told Gadadhar Pandit, "Get up." Such are the pastimes of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. You should know that Lord Krishna himself violated his own promise just to keep the promise of grandfather Bhishma. Intending to make my promise true, Lord Krishna broke his own promise. That's the Lord Bhishma Dev talking. That is Lord taking up the wheel of the chariot to try to attack Bhishma and protect his devotee Arjuna. Similarly, tolerating separation from you, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has protected your vow with great endeavor. In this way, Sarvabhauma revived Gadadhar Pandit, then both of them, grief-stricken, returned to Puri. All the devotees would abandon all kinds of duties for Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's sake, yet the Lord did not like the devotees giving up their promised duties. All these are the misgivings of loving affairs. Whoever listens to these incidents gets the shelter of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's lotus feet very soon. It's interesting, the initiation of Gadadhar Prabhu, he was, when they were in Navadvip actually, before they went to Puri, Gadadhar was a very close friend of Mukunda, who was, of course, famous for his kirtans, singing and so on, and a very intimate associate of Lord Chaitanya also. And Mukunda was from what's it called? In Bangladesh, Dhaka, and what's the other city called? The other big city in Bangladesh, what's it called? I've forgotten. Chittagong. And Chitgaon. He was from there, from that district. And he'd moved to Navadvip to join Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's pastimes. So, a very close friend of Gadadhar, and they would spend time together discussing Krishna Katha. And one day, and especially, Gadadhar Pandit was always keen to associate with advanced devotees, associates of Lord Chaitanya and so on. He loved to hear from them. And Mukunda also. And whenever a great devotee would come to Navadvip, he would take Gadadhar to. One day he said to Gadadhar that a great devotee has now arrived in Navadvip. Would you like to meet him? So naturally, Gadadhar was very keen to meet him. Oh no, what type of tissues are these? Anyway, something's there. So they went, and went to this house, quite an opulent looking house. So they went inside the house, and Gadadhar was very simple, brahmachari, he was very austere. He was known for his austerities also. He lived very simply. They went inside the house, and inside the house, he had a bit of a shock. And Mukunda said, "I'm going to introduce you to this very elevated soul." So they went inside, and I'm sorry, but my memory is maybe a little tired, I don't know. What was his name again? Pundari Vijayanidhi. So he says he's a great devotee of the Lord, very advanced devotee. And he thought, what is this? There was this Pundari Vijayanidhi sitting there on a throne. It was like on a throne, like a king. And he had servants all around him, fanning him with chamaras, peacock feathers. And he was there with a big mirror, manicuring his face with various scents and perfumes. Someone was combing his black silky hair, oiled. Someone else was bringing various kinds of opulent foodstuffs. He had a hookah pipe there he was sometimes smoking. Spittoon, pan. What is this? I'm bewildered. He was bewildered. He thought, Mukunda's brought me to meet a very advanced devotee. This person looks like a Vishai. He looks like a sense enjoyer. He started to doubt, who is this person? Oh,